Hello and welcome to another Stellarian Games video. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at how to build this Wizard's Tower Golem. This is going to be broken into three videos. The first video we're going to be looking at the construction of the golem itself. The second video will be the construction of the towers. And then the third video will be kind of the detailing and painting work of the overall piece. So this piece won the April Guild Build Challenge on the Tabletop Crafters Guild, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Tabletop Guild members themselves for posting this in the top 5, and then also for everyone who voted for the piece. I was really excited for this challenge. I think overall the challenge of foam being a combat hazard was a great challenge. And it forced me to think very differently about how I would do a build like this. When I first heard foam, my immediate thought was foam is really good for making buildings, so that's what I wanted to do, is make a building that somehow is a combat hazard. But then I started going into more of the thought of I think it should also be a creature if it's going to be some sort of combat encounter. So I merged the two into this golem that was really kind of a defensive mechanism for the Wizard's Tower itself, and that's kind of where this project came from. So let's dive right into the construction of the golem in this first video, and then we'll get to the other videos later. As with many of my projects, I started this one off with a sketch. This was really a sketch trying to capture the elements that I wanted to put together, both the golem and the tower, as well as kind of the scale of what I wanted to be working at. After putting that sketch together, I decided to do more of a scale sketch so that I'd be able to line up some of the armature pieces later on and make sure that it would fit at the scale that I wanted it to be. So I just used a very large sheet of paper and had some miniatures kind of for scale, just so I'd know I'm working at the right size, and then finish out kind of the outline of what I wanted the golem to look like. Then I started unspooling some aluminum armature wire into long lengths. I'd use this as the actual armature core for the model. Straightening those out and then bending them in half so that I'd end up with a stronger pair of wires. I'd clamp them into a vise and attach the other end into a drill, and then use the drill to wind them into a twisted pair armature wire. This is much stronger than the single wire. Then I start shaping the wire to the scale of the drawing that I had, making sure that I kind of got the proportions of the body correct, and then use that extra cutoff portion to attach it to the legs to make them even stronger, so that it would end up being 4 armature wires thick to hold up all of the weight. Use some duct tape to kind of hold those wires together while I mixed up some milliput and use that to kind of form the core right around the hip bones, which would solidify the model. Then I use the pliers to kind of finalize the arm positions and the actual pose of the model. Then I used a chunk of 1/2-inch plywood and just drew out a rough base that I'd use for the base of the model. Cut that out on a bandsaw, and then drilling in some holes right where the feet would go through. Countersinking in some drills with some Forstner bits. Those will be used for the bolt heads as they poke up through the plywood. Then just attaching some nuts on top with some washers to hold the feet in place on the base itself. Tightening those up so that they won't wiggle around. Just nipping off those bolts so they won't stick out of the top of the foot. Now I'm starting to sculpt the actual portion of the golem, the very top shoulder section, and I'm just doing a very rough cut with a knife and just kind of shaping it about the size that I wanted it, and kind of cutting in grooves for where the wires were. That'll allow it to sit down onto the armature wires a little bit more rigidly. Adding in some hot glue, and then placing that right on top of the armature and letting that set up. Next, I'm working on kind of the core of the body section. So again, marking out where those wires are going to be intersecting, cutting those out on a hot wire cutter, and gluing those into place underneath. I'm just using 2-inch XPS foam to kind of block out the rough shape of the body at this point, just kind of filling in the overall structure of it, not really worried about shape all too much at this point. That would come at a little bit later point, just making sure that it's all filled in and getting kind of the right structure that I wanted in place. Next, I started just kind of tearing away at the outside of it to give it the stone, earthen feel that I wanted for the golem. Just using my fingernails really to tear into it and give it the shape that I'm looking for. I did use the knife in some places to give overall larger shape, especially on that corner of the shoulder, but otherwise it was a lot of finger tearing on the styrofoam. Next, I'm using some XPS foam and cutting rough rock shapes. This would be used for all of the legs and arms to block out the kind of the muscle structure of the golem itself. Just kind of slicing away and making rough rock shapes of varying sizes and shapes, lengths, smaller ones, larger ones, just so I'd have a large variety of different rocks that I can kind of play with and fill in the muscle sections. I'm just using a hot glue gun to attach those directly onto that armature, and just went ahead and filled in with all of those different rock components, just making sure that it kind of fit a basic muscle shape of anatomy. The feet I wanted to be fairly large and impressive, as if, you know, getting kicked by those feet would be very painful. So the foot themselves stands almost as high as a miniature. I'm just using a dowel and chipping away some of the wood to make it look more like a hewn log that the golem would be holding. Drilling in some small holes and just tapping in a little bit of steel wire. That would actually be the anchor for the bucket underneath the mace, basically. I'm using some medium firm Sculpey and sculpting out the what will become kind of the metal components to his mace, and this is the actual bucket portion for the mace as well. This is all just Sculpey, and this will be baked when it's done. Adding some spikes to the bucket, and then adding in the kind of the metal rod that would hold it to the mace itself. The design I had with this ended up breaking after it was baked, so I ended up attaching in a slightly different way after it was baked. Now I'm just finishing up the hands after it was baked and attaching just individual rocks to form fingers holding the shaft of the mace. Now I'm taking rocks and filling in sections that I thought needed a little bit more of a highlight, and including on the torn body sections as well. I didn't want it to just have that torn look, so I added a lot of kind of exposed boulder look to the body, which gives it either an armor look or just muscle look as well. Now I'm starting the head cutout on my circle cutter. This I cut out the outside and then cut out the inside, and am working on the actual electrical wiring for the eyes. Fitting that into the kind of the top section of the head and gluing that into place. So this is the end result of the Golem build portion. The next video will cover the building of the towers. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and the like button down below. And while you're at it, you can check out some of the other videos that I have on the Stellarian Games channel. Thank you, and hope to see you again next time.